Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of some non-fantasy book recommendations. I primarily read fantasy, as many of you know and can probably tell by my shelves, but I do enjoy jumping into other genres from time to time, and I do enjoy a lot of different genres. So for this list, I have picked mostly books that aren't just different from fantasy, but are different from each other as well. So the first book on this list would be a memoir, and that would be Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. As many memoirs are, this is a deeply personal story. It's very raw, and it's one of those things that you go into where I wouldn't go into expecting really to rate it, because part of what I think makes memoirs so powerful is when they can be so incredibly honest. And this author is in this particular memoir. It is about being a Black man in America and a lot of his experiences growing up. You follow him from the time that he is young, and you see different events throughout his life, different conversations with different people, some really tragic events, and it's woven together in a way that is just so incredible. His writing is stunning and impactful and heavy, and I feel bad saying I enjoyed this book because that's probably not the right way to put it, but I just felt like it was so extremely powerful, and I'm so appreciative that there are people who are willing to be so open and honest, because there are things about this book that are going to be very difficult to read, I think, especially for certain groups of people who hold certain mindsets. To see somebody speak in a way that is a little contrary to maybe what you would think. But again, that's what I so appreciate about this, is that he's not afraid to be so incredibly honest as to possibly offend in certain instances, which I feel like I'm not selling the book at all at this point. But I read this at a time when I was pretty emotional myself, and the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that we all, I think, experience from time to time is captured in this story, but there's kind of this light at the end of the tunnel. There's this love that you find in working toward things, in having family. I just highly recommend reading it. It's also incredibly short, so you could probably knock it out in one sitting. Going in a completely different direction, we have a YA contemporary romance, and that would be Geekerella. Every now and then, I like to grab something that I know is going to be comfy and fluffy and fun, and I feel like that's exactly what this was. And it was a little bit, obviously, as you can tell from the name, a Cinderella retelling. We follow a young girl who is just so into this one very nerdy sci-fi show, and it was her and her dad's favorite thing. But her dad and her mother are both gone. Her father had remarried after her mother had died, and as a Cinderella story would make you expect, her stepmother and her stepsisters are not so great, and her father dies, and now the stepmother has custody of her and is really not very kind to her. She doesn't seem to think that this little obsession she has with this sci-fi show is worth having, and it was tapping into some things that I think a lot of us experience when we are fans of something really passionately. It touched on how important those things can be in our lives. Despite loving these things, there are still people that also love these things in fandoms that are not the nicest. So you see some of that toxicity. And I also just felt like the romance was cute. We follow what would be the prince character in this story, who has been cast for a remake of the show that the main character, the Cinderella character, her favorite show, is being made into a movie, and he has been cast to play the lead, and she hates him. She thinks he's just some new hotshot hot guy, and she doesn't think he's going to do the role justice. But then you get his perspective, and he has his own set of issues, kind of showing you the struggles of somebody who has a parent that just wants their child to be famous, and what it's like to be famous. And through some very interesting circumstances, these two end up interacting without realizing who the other person is. It was very cute. It was very fun, and I think if you are looking for something that is cute and fluffy but can tap into that fandom nerdy side of you, and also can tap into some other pretty sad sad things, I think you'll really like this one. Next up, we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I have sung this book's praises many a time. It is a science fiction story. It takes place with our main character Spencer on a different planet that is constantly being attacked from the skies by this other group of people, this race of aliens. They don't really know, but they do know that in order to fight back, they have to have the best of the best Air Force. Our main character Spencer so badly wants to be a part of this. She wants to be a hero. She wants to fight back. She's really feisty, but her father famously abandoned in a very important flight, and so she has a lot of people that don't really believe in her and are actually working against her. And she, when you first meet her, I'm not gonna lie, she's a little much. She's a little obnoxious to an extent. But she grows on you, and she grows as a character. The spaceship scenes where they're fighting in the air are so masterfully done. I sometimes can kind of just get bored with action scenes because after a while I'm like, okay, and then this person dodged, and in the case of this, like, and then they dodged getting shot at, whatever. But this one actually kills it. It's so good. The action scenes are phenomenal, edge of your seat, high stakes type of action scenes, and the stakes are very high. Stuff happens that's pretty emotional and sad, and it is definitely easy to digest. It's very youthful in tone, almost middle grade, but I think that it still has so much heart to it. I highly recommend it. Next up, we have a historical fiction, and I have talked about this one from time to time, but I still want even more people to pick it up, and that would be Vinland Saga. This is a manga series about Vikings. It follows a young boy named Thorfinn, and I joke that it follows the same plotline I feel like every Viking story does, which is that at the beginning his dad dies, and then he's kind of set on this quest for revenge. And our main character, though, his revenge storyline is so tragic because his father is killed when he is a child, and then he ends up sort of within the group of people who killed his father from the time he's a kid, and growing up, all he wants to do is have the opportunity to kill the person who killed his dad. But in order to have this chance, the man who is responsible for his father's death basically makes him run errands for them and makes him scout for them. And so he's basically turning our main character Thorfinn into a Viking. His father used to be a Viking, the one that passed away, but his father turned his back on that life, and all he wanted was a peaceful, nice life with his family up in Iceland, and obviously all of that was ruined. And Thorfinn is stuck with these Vikings. He's essentially becoming a Viking. He's starting to go down this path that his father would have never wanted for him, but because he's a child, he's blind to it, and it's so sad, and it's so moving. And Askeladd, who is kind of like the villainous character, is such a complex villain, arguably more fascinating than Thorfinn himself. And I love me some Thorfinn, but oh my goodness, is this series so good, so emotional. It gets very deep in ways that you wouldn't expect. It kind of questions, what is life? Is there an afterlife? It has so many conversations and topics that I would not expect, but it's so phenomenal. Plus, there is an anime adaptation, and it is also fantastic. Last on the list is one that I don't know if this counts for non-fantasy because it's kind of sort of a subgenre of science fiction fantasy. I would say it's steampunk, and that would be Aeronauts Winless by Jim Butcher. This was not actually a book that I was completely head over heels for, but I still think it's definitely worth checking out, and there are so many things I loved about it, and I recommend books whether I love them or hate them anyway, because I know it's subjective and a lot of you might enjoy it. But this particular story, the steampunk elements are really cool. They essentially have giant airships, which is super fun. One of our characters is a captain of one of these, and there's a lot of really interesting characters that I fell in love with. We have this character who is just this giant person, but she's the most soft-hearted person, and then you have a character named Gwendolyn who's super feisty, and then you have a cat who can talk. And I'm not gonna lie, the cat who can talk thing, I was like, this is just one of those bookish things. It's like characters who love to read in books. You're like, that's like the easiest way to appeal to us, right? A talking cat is, in my mind, along those same lines. But this talking cat was fantastic. His name is Raoul. If you listen to the audiobook, which is one of my favorite audiobooks, the voice the narrator does, first off, the narrator's amazing, but the voice he gives the cat is so good. It's really deep and kind of gravelly and so judgmental, which is exactly, I feel like, the voice that this cat would have. But anyway, I highly recommend this story if you are looking for something that is steampunk, because it delivers on all of those things. It has such fun steampunk elements, and the characters are so lovable. That's it for some non-fantasy book recommendations. I did do another one of these videos, and I'll have that linked down below. And I, of course, the more I read that is not fantasy, will have more of these videos from time to time, but feel free to recommend some of your favorite non-fantasy books. I'm always looking for recommendations. I don't always know where to start in other genres, so the more that you can recommend, the better. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a delightful rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.